Well, hello, welcome back. I'm Bob, joined here with Todd, and this is the Pastor's Podcast. We are coming to you from Comstock Park, Michigan, Maranatha Bible Church, just outside of Grand Rapids. And for the last several weeks, perhaps even months, we've been going through the Family Matters series, and we've been looking at the relationships all within the family and structure within the family, discipline within the family, leading of the family, setting goals for the family, all of those kind of things. And today we want to talk about the importance of the church in the family, but specifically how families and parents need to prioritize and really pass that down, the priority of the church, and really cultivate a love for the church, right?
Exactly.
And so what we want to do is first start out saying why we're doing this. I think it's very important to have a kind of a base understanding for this, right?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about some statistics here in just a moment on what's happening to kids that grow up in the church and then leave the church. But I think it's also critical for parents to understand and remember that they're not going to be parenting their kids the rest of their life.
Right.
Hopefully.
Right.
You've got 18, 20 years with your child, and then likely they're going to move out and move on. And but the one constant should be in their life a love for the church. So it's not like we just want to see our kids committed to the church while they're in our home. We want to pass on to them this deep love and care for and commitment to the bride of Christ. That's going to carry them beyond our home, and we really have a short time to do that. And so that's kind of the topic of this conversation, and maybe you can give us some statistics on why we need to talk about this.
Yeah, I think what you said is very important is leaving that almost legacy of, if your kids look back at you, say when they're 50 years old, and they say, what was the priority of my family, and what love did my dad have? You know, you'd hope to be able to say this. I know we would hope to be able to say, our kids would say, man, they really love Christ.
Yeah.
They love the church. They love the family and all of that. And so
Let me add something you just said real quick.
Yeah.
You said to love Christ and to love the church. And that is so good, because I think sometimes there's a dichotomy where people, young people, even some believers, who say, I love Christ, but I don't love the church.
Right. I'd be a Christian if it wasn't for all those Christians.
Yeah, right. And so they separate their love for the church and the love for Christ, and they think they can love Christ without loving His church. But biblically, to love Christ is to love His church.
They're synonymous, right?
They're synonymous. To love Him is to love His body.
That's good.
So, so I think we have to very carefully but clearly put to death this notion that it's possible to love Jesus and yet hate His church.
Right.
That is not a healthy place to be at all.
Right. So the I know this is off topic, but the home church movements that say we don't go to any organized religion or something like that, this is how we're going to raise it, just with me and my family right here. That's really not church, so to speak. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Ken Ham actually wrote a really good book, fairly new, last couple of years, Will They Stand? And this is in response to the really mass exodus of children once they grow up. So really what he's looking at are kids who are in the church. Kids grow up in the church, like we have over 100 kids that come here to church. They're growing up in the church, and once they hit, some even late high school, but the vast majority, once they graduate high school, they go on to college, or they go into a vocation or trade school or whatever it is, essentially the common denominator is they're no longer under the parents' home, right, or their parents' roof. So kids are being sent out, and now the statistic is, and this was a little bit old, it was early 2000s, but it was 7 out of every 10 students who considered themselves regulars at church walked away from the faith once they left home. And so that's within 1 year of leaving home, going on their own, whatever that looked like. The common denominator of them leaving was their faith was challenged in some way. And, Ken Ham will lean you towards evolution, and, that worldview is pulling you in, and perhaps that's true. But their faith was challenged, and they had no answer to give. And so the easy way out was just to say, I don't really believe in that anyway. That was my mom's, that was my dad's. We just did that on weekends. We only went there on Christmas and Easter, whatever it happened to be. And so now they've gone the way of the world and they're atheists or, whatever.
70%.
70%. And as I said, that statistic was about 5 to 7 years old. So we know things aren't getting better.
Yeah.
So perhaps it's even a little bit higher.
That's a staggering number.
That's huge.
So, there's a lot of other issues at play in that statistic. Are they believers in the first place, which is another question you have to ask. But still, say it's 5 out of 10 that are true believers, but maybe walk away from the church for a time. That's sad. That's scary. And that is not a good place for the church to be, and it's not a good place for that person to be, because they've just distanced themselves from the very entity that they need to be growing in godliness and holiness.
Right. The other one of the other statistics that it said was 9%. So, and this one's actually 2018 statistic. 9% of teens who call themselves born again, so it'd be 13 to 19, that call themselves born again, believe in an absolute moral truth. So out of the 100% of teens that would raise their hand and say, I'm born again, 9% of those, so 9 out of 100 of those actually believe in an absolute moral truth, which means that they would be pro-gay marriage, pro-homosexuality in general, pro-sex outside of the bonds of marriage, so on and so forth.
Wow.
And those would still be perhaps considered even in the church because they haven't left underneath the parents' kind of roof yet. These other statistics that he talks about are also staggering, and he says the percentage of people, the percentage of kids that have a biblical worldview declined from generation to generation. And so he talked about the boomers, which would be the oldest generation, 10%, and you bring that down to Gen Z, you're at 4%. 4% of kids who have went into church, came out of the church, 4% believe in a biblical worldview. 4%. That's insane. Church attendance has declined. You're looking at 4.7% in 2015. And those teenagers in favor of gay marriage specifically, anywhere from 77 to 86%.
Wow.
And so some of these statistics are just absolutely staggering. And as the worldview and as the belief in the Bible continues to go down, we look at our world, how we are, and we wonder why there's war. Well, if you believe in evolution, war really means nothing because it's just survival of the fittest. You wonder why there's things like transgenderism and suicide and all these other things that happen when you leave the image of God and you leave that you were created man and woman. All of a sudden, you are free to do whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and really how this fits into this series is we believe it's incumbent upon mom and dad to give to their kids a deep affection for the church.
Right.
Not just as an institution, but as a commitment to a body that will be for their own edification and maturity and growth for the rest of their life.
And that's key, the institution model. So we're not a corporate America.
Yeah.
We're not CEO, CFO going down the line. This is an organism that is put together by Christ.
Yeah.
And we're not here to fulfill a role as an institution like a nonprofit or something.
Right.
Though we are, but we're not filling that role. This is a spiritual entity.
And it's an entity that Christ purchased with his own blood. He gave his Holy Spirit, and he united us together in this body. He gave us spiritual gifts to serve the body, and he calls this body the pillar and the support of the truth. And it is the primary mechanism through which he is working in this age.
Right.
For 2,000 years.
For 2,000 years.
It is, he's working in all ways and in multiple fashions, but the primary means through which he is working and accomplishing his purpose is the church.
That's right.
So as mom and dad, we need to help our kids love this entity, this organism known as the church. One more statistic to add to what you're saying. One particular study found that when both parents were faithful and active in the church, 93% of their children remained faithful. When just one parent was faithful, 73% of their children remained faithful. When neither parent was particularly active in the church, only 53% of their children stayed faithful. And in those instances where neither parent was active at all and only attended church now and then, the percentage dropped to a mere 6%. Those are some very telling statistics.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very clear. When mom and dad love the church, that tends to communicate to the kids that they ought to love the church as well.
And it's common sense. You think of almost anything that the parents are into, we would
Of
say.
course.
The kids are going to be following that as
Sports
well.
or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
hobbies.
Yeah, so no, that's really good. So what we want to do today is, because we do see this rise of kids leaving the church, we don't want our kids to leave the church. Of course, as they are growing up and they move away, we hope and pray that they do find a church in their area that would be similar. Or and we're blessed here at Maranatha. We have generations of people that are going to church here as well, which is really, really great to see. And so I think that's what we want to do. And so we want to get really practical. We want to say, okay, what does the Bible say about family? What does the Bible say about, the importance of church? And then what can we do practically to cultivate that within our family, specifically with our kids?
Yeah.
So first of all, I looked through the whole Bible this afternoon.
Really, in one afternoon?
Yeah, I Googled it.
Wow.
So there is nothing in the Bible that says thou shalt cultivate love for the church within your children, right? So
course.
it's not there. Much like the stuff we've been talking about, it's principle-based, right?
course.
So we look at principles, from those principles, and we take the practice.
Implicit principles versus direct principles.
Right. So there's no commands, but taken from that, and I think there's a lot we could say, but we narrowed it down to a few. And something that I really liked, 1 Timothy 4:16, pay close attention to yourself and to your teaching. Persevere in these things, for as you do, this will ensure salvation both for yourself and for those who hear you. And I like this. I know, we hit on hermeneutics here. So the asterisk is, yes, Paul is writing to Timothy about a church in Ephesus, but the principle that is there is that people, generally speaking, are going to hear what you say and they're going to see what you do. And by hearing what you say and seeing what you do, the people who you are influencing around you are going to be influenced somehow. So if you're saying, you look at your kids, you say, hey, the church is really important and you have to love Jesus, but then you're off golfing Sunday morning, they're really not going to take you very seriously. And so we want to pay close attention to ourselves. What is it that we're doing? And then pay close attention to our teaching or our doctrine, because those things have consequences, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, both of those are critical. Our kids hear what we believe and they see what we do.
Right.
So Paul is telling Timothy there, you pay careful attention to those things. And he goes on to say in that verse, because if you do, you will ensure salvation both for yourself and for those who hear you. So there's spiritual implications, eternal implications
that's good.
of this. And so, again, to bring it back to what we're talking about here, what is critical is for mom and dad to love the body of Christ. And if they do, then that's going to be a tenor and a trajectory that's set down in the family, and the kids are going to see that, and they're going to notice it. And as we've said many times here before, so much more is caught than taught in the family.
That's good.
And so what are we as parents doing when we talk about the church and when we model our attitude towards the church? That has huge implications for our kids.
Yeah, and that leads us right to our first question. Yeah. So how is our attitude on Saturday night before church? This is a big one. I mean, most people don't actually think about Saturday night coming into church. And I just got off the phone, and there was something going on Saturday that was actually out of town, and it's the week that I'm teaching here. I'd be back Saturday afternoon or evening, and I said, no, I can't. I'm teaching on Sunday. And they're like, well, why does that matter? I said, well, I gotta get ready for church, you know. And so I think the idea of actually preparing yourself the day before, because we have a kind of a tendency to be more flippant, like, oh, I'm just going to church. Like, what's the big deal? And so I know we're not Israel. I understand that, right? I know Moses isn't over us, right? But Exodus 19 is so good, because God tells Moses, get these people ready, because they're going to interact with, they're going to meet me, they're going to be here. So it was actually a 3-day process, if I remember correctly, that Moses had to go down and say, people, wash yourself, get rid of this stuff, get ready to have an encounter with your God.
Yeah.
And so that's what they did before they came before him.
In other words, it takes some preparation and some thought. And yeah, so we have a saying at our house that Sunday mornings begin Saturday night. And part of that is we're a ministry family, and I work as a pastor. But that principle, I think, needs to be true for believers. That what you do on Saturday night affects what you do on Sunday morning, and whether you go to Sunday morning.
Right.
And so now, hear us carefully, those of you who are listening. We're not trying to set down a legalistic principle that if you're doing something after 8 p.m. on Saturday night, you're in sin. We're not saying those
Everyone
kinds
knows it's 9 anyway.
But what we are saying is that if your kids are going to love the church, they have to see that you're loving the church. In fact, they have to see that you're thinking about what you're doing on Saturday night and how that can affect you on Sunday morning. So if you choose to say, well, I'm going to go to a movie, I'm going to go to the midnight movies on Saturday night, and I'll see how I'm feeling in the morning, and if I can get up for church, I'll go. Well, guess what? That they pick up on that.
Yeah.
And they see that. Well, it's kind of optional. So, for us, and I'm not saying this is the criteria that everyone needs to abide by, but we generally, with few exceptions, do nothing on Saturday nights.
Right.
Except have a meal together and kind of get ready for the next morning, and baths and showers and lay the clothes out and get stuff ready for the next morning, because we know that the Sunday's coming, and so we want to be ready, and so we're preparing for that, and we're not just kind of scrambling on Saturday nights or Sunday mornings to decide whether or not we're going to go to church. No, we're going to church,
Right.
And we're laying down the necessary preparations for that on Saturday night.
That's really good. Yeah, I know we've never talked about it like you and I, but we do the same thing. Clothes are laid out, baths are ready, bags are packed, and I'm getting something in my mind. What am I going to make for breakfast for the kids? Really,
Yeah.
I love making the breakfast for the kids. So, and then just getting prepared spiritually. And so, hey, what's our sermon on tomorrow? What are we going to talk about tomorrow? And it's not sitting down for like 2 hours. It's just conversations in the milieu of life that you're talking about, at least for us.
Yeah.
And so there's not a whole sermon getting ready for the sermon, right? My kids are not old enough.
You're preaching as they're laying their socks out.
Right. No, it's nothing like that. And
Yeah.
so, but it's really a dedicated time for the family to be together, that you kind of take that breath, you kind of just relax, and sometimes we actually watch a movie or we'll do something just to be together. And then as we're together, the kids actually go to bed early on Saturday nights. Sue and I go to bed a little bit early as well and get up, and so that way you're just ready to go. So you don't have to actually think about it.
Good.
So I think, first of all, how do you view Saturday night? So secondly then, how do you view Sunday morning? And, are you getting up and throwing everything together? And look, we've all had those days, and what we're talking about is your normal function, not the exception to the rule, right? So we all have that time where somebody forgot something, or, the kids were supposed to wear different shoes, or whatever that looks like. We all get that. But at the end of the day, is your normal practice these things is what we're talking about. And so how is your attitude going to church on Sunday? So how would you say the attitude, how can you cultivate a love for the church even on Sunday morning with your kids?
Yeah, I think it's even how you talk about it. I think even throughout the week, not just Sunday mornings, but you're talking about it. How do you talk about the church? What words come out of your mouth as mom and dad about the church? Are your words cutting? Are they dismissive of the church? Are your words kind of downplaying the importance of the church? Do you get critical of the church in how you talk about it? And when you speak of the body of Christ, is it kind of negative and cynical? They're going to pick up on that.
Do you talk about the church at all?
Do you talk about the church at all?
Right.
Do they see that as important? It's a topic of conversation. And then how do you talk about the church? They should hear from mom and dad, we love the church. We love being together with the body of Christ. We love corporate worship. We love hearing the word expounded. We love the fellowship. We love the interaction that takes place, after the service, and grabbing a meal with someone after church. And man, that's the highlight of our week. I can't miss that. And there's exceptions. There's things that come up and you're sick, or you have to be out of town for a business trip, or there's exceptions to the rule. But the overall tenor and tone of your attitude and your speech towards the church as mom and dad ought to be just highly encouraging to them. Like, they should want to be at church because you want to be at church.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think sometimes what happens is there's kind of talk and whisper that goes on in the homes about how, well, this happened and I don't like this, and they're negative and cynical towards the church, and all that just has a cascading effect upon the kids.
Yeah, no, I think that's wonderful. I think however we portray that Sunday morning to our kids is what's going to be in their mind.
All right.
And so we need to be very, very careful about the words that we say and how we're getting to church on Sunday morning. So are you when you're coming to church, is there an argument that's going on? And, as soon as you pull in the parking lot, okay, we'll finish this later. Everybody get out of the car. Hey, very nice to see you, right? The old caricature. But
Yeah.
I think I think the attitude that we have is so very important.
Yeah.
And how, as you were saying, and I think this is so key, the way that we talk about church. And this isn't even about like slandering people. That's a whole nother issue.
Right.
But this is like, how do you portray your love for the church by the words you use when your kids are around you?
Yeah.
I mean, generally speaking, but really specifically, when your kids are there, are you telling them how much you'd love to be at church?
Yeah.
Are you telling them, hey, you get to have fellowship, you get to worship corporately, you get to hear the word expounded, like you said, you get to have great coffee, you get to have
Cookies.
cookies, whatever it happens to be. And so,
Yeah.
or is it just a social gathering that you could come to or not come to? Or you say, I hope so-and-so's there. If they're not there, then it's kind of a waste.
Right.
So yeah, it's very good.
Good.
And then, is church just a Sunday gathering, or is church a way of life? So, how do we view coming to church? We're not talking about every single time the doors open, are you here? But what we are talking about is, is it a priority in your life? Do you love spending time with other church members throughout the course of the week? Or do you just see church as that 1.5 hours that I need to tick the box on Sundays and get home? So how can we as parents do better cultivating our children's hearts to love the church outside of the normal, what we would call like Sunday morning services?
Yeah, I think it's what you're just talking about. It's a way of life. It's not just something that we can take or leave. It is a way of life. So we love Sunday mornings. We want to minister to the people in our church who are hurting. We're bringing meals. We're serving, and you want to encourage your kids to serve as well. As they grow up and get older, you want to encourage their involvement in the church and take them along when you go visit someone in the hospital or go someone who's sick at home. I mean, all of that, you're just involving them in the life of the church. And so I think you're helping them see that that they are to be a key part of that, and you're just bringing them along in that process. Here's an analogy. I don't know if it's a good one or not, but someone asked me recently about, you're laughing.
I like the preface. I don't know if this is good. I'm just going to throw
It helps me. So someone asked me, how do you prioritize your days or weeks, or how do you get it all done? And everyone's heard that analogy before. If you got a big jar and you have big rocks and little rocks and sand, and to get it all in there, you've got to get the big rocks in first. Then you put the little rocks in, then you put the pebbles in, then you put the sand in, then you put the water in. So in my mind, as I think about church being a priority, one of those big rocks has to be the body of Christ. And our kids have to see us putting that in first. You're not putting in all the other extraneous, small, extracurricular things and filling that bucket up with all these other things that you're doing in life. And at the end of it, you got this big rock out here, which is the church, and you can't fit it in because you filled up your schedule with all kinds of other extracurricular activities that may be fun and enjoyable, but don't show them the love that they ought to have for the church. So for me, the issue is, okay, the big rocks go in first. So one of those big rocks is a commitment to the church. And then if I have time to do these other things, I'll do those other things, but I'm not going to sacrifice my commitment to and love for the church for these other things that have lesser value. So
that's good.
That may not be a good analogy, but it works for me. Because you're
I
still
just like how
laughing at
you
me.
said everybody knows this, but everybody's heard it, but I've never heard it.
You've never heard that
gotta be
analogy.
honest with you.
Okay.
So, but I understand. I think it's very good because most believers and I would say specifically to our church here, they're not struggling between sinful things and church things. So with your analogy, the rocks they're struggling with are things that are good.
Yeah.
But they're not the priority. And so you get those rocks mixed up a little bit here and there.
Yeah, you can fill that jar with all kinds of little rocks, all which are fun and good things. I mean, and I would never tell a parent, withhold your child from sports if they want to do sports, but you might want to think about, should my kid do sports that take them away from church every weekend for 4 months?
Right.
Or how much are we doing on Saturday nights? That's fun stuff to fill it up the bucket with, but is it really enabling me and us to be at the church on Sunday on a consistent basis? So all of it's good stuff, most of it, but you have to really assess the value and the priority of those things that could detract from a commitment to the church, and they pick up on that.
That's good. So pay attention to your rocks.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what you're saying. And then lastly, a big one is, do you pray for your church? And this goes kind of what we've been hitting on the whole time is what's on your mind. And I know for us, some of the sweetest times that we have are sitting down with our kids, and they talk to kids in Sunday schools, and they tell us like, hey, it's funny, right? You want to see how somebody's doing. You can ask them if they're doing fine. You really want to see how somebody's doing. Ask their kids.
Yeah, right.
And so our kids come back and they say, hey, so and so said this was going on, or we have our small group. So we had somebody just had a baby in our small group, and so we get to pray for them.
Sure.
And then we ask our kids, hey, what do you want to pray for the church for? And so it's just one of these nice times you can sit down with your kids, or when they're going to bed, you can ask them and just say, hey, what do you want to pray for the church? And so not only does it show that the church is on your mind as a parent, but it also is reinforcing the fact that the church should be on their mind as kids do.
You can invite them into praying for the missionaries of the church. There's always needs in the body. Invite them into praying for those things. I think just praying for the church shows a commitment to the church. You're interested in it, and you're concerned for it, and you're praying about it.
Yeah, that's good. So those are just a few cursory things we kind of just thought of. And so the last thing then is we go back to kind of full circle what we've been talking about for this whole series is whose responsibility is it? We had our women's retreat a couple weeks ago, and so the women were gone, and you can feel it when there's 80 women gone or 60 women gone or whatever it is. And so I know some of the dads did, as the kids came in with some wild hair and
but they were there.
But they were there, so praise the Lord. So it's the responsibility. And so how would we say, hey, here's kind of the responsibility in the family. Who's to take that lead in the family?
Well, obviously mom and dad need to be on the same page on that. They've just got to talk about these things. Mom and dad have to have their priorities straight and their commitment to the church in place. If that's shaky or they're not on the same page, it's going to be noticed by the kids. So number one, mom and dad have to talk about these things, and husband and wife really have to commit to this together. And then they need to be modeling that for their kids. But I would say in answer to your question, the bulk of the responsibility lies with dad, with the husband. Because as we've said so many times here before, as the husband goes, the family goes. As the father goes, the family goes. And so here's another statistic. If a father does not go to church, even if his wife does, only 1 child in 50 will become a regular worshiper. If a father does go regularly, regardless of what the mother does, between 2/3 and 3/4 of their children will attend church as adults. If a father attends church irregularly, between 1/2 and 2/3 of their kids will attend church with some regularity as adults. If a mother does not go to church, but a father does, a minimum of 2/3 of their children will end up attending the church. In contrast, if a father does not go to church, but the mother does, on average, 2/3 of their children will not attend church.
Wow. That's
so
huge.
Again, that just lays the onus where it needs to be. Kids do what dad in particular does. And that's not to exclude moms. Moms are a key part of that.
Right.
But dad sets the spiritual tenor of that family. So if you're a single mom family, then that is all true of you as a single mom. But in families with mom and dad, then dad really does set that tone. So I would, again, lay the onus where it needs to be laid, at the husband's, father's feet. They need to be the ones saying, listen, we're going to church. They shouldn't be the ones waking up on Sunday morning saying, I'm not sure I feel like it. I'm too tired, and there's a game coming on at 10, so I want to be home for that. That should not be the case.
Yeah.
They should be the ones saying, that's all right, let's go. We're going.
No, that's really good. I think that because as they come to church, the things that the parents are teaching them, and look, when the kids are younger, the primary teachers may be the moms, but it's still set by the dad.
Yeah.
And so he's actually saying the same things perhaps the moms are. But when you come to church, because the problem is families rely on the church to be the spiritual beacons for their kids. And while we certainly do our best, you're only talking a couple hours a week, maybe tops, that you have with them. And the parents have 24 hours a day, however many days a week that they're with them. And so that influence is going to come directly from, obviously, as you just read, the dads, but the families in general.
Yeah.
And so if you're teaching it at home and then they come to church and hear that same thing, your kids are not connecting these things together. You're teaching them the word, they come to church, they hear the word. You're teaching them, biblical principles, they come to church, they're hearing that. So now they're putting that together. My normal way of life is to be connected to a church.
That's right.
And so my family's doing it, they're doing it, and now we can go together, and those are some staggering statistics.
Really are.
Just put on the dad.
Exactly.
To get up, and if it's just going to church, right? Like however many of the things we can do as dads that we do with ease, and then when it comes to church, it's like, oh, why do we have to go, right?
Yeah.
But loving your family is taking them to church.
It's good. Absolutely.
Well, I certainly hope that this was helpful for you guys. And if you have any questions regarding this, please feel free to shoot us an email. But next week, we'll continue our series looking at family matters, and hope to see you then. Have a good week.